spoilers for the game Cry of Fear, as well as trigger warnings for talk of depression, suicide, mental health, and drug use. In Cry of Fear, you play as a 19-year-old named Simon Henriksson. He gets hit by a car on one of his many late-night walks in Stockholm, Sweden, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. We play through most of the game as a version of Simon that can still walk, though. This version is called Book Simon and is a fictional representation that the real Simon came up with as a way to cope with his disability, and he does so by writing everything down in a journal. The game is centered around his depression and anxiety as well as how alone he feels, and I'm interested in seeking a bit further into his psyche because this game is actually what caused me to get some professional help. I choose to believe that Simon actually does experience hallucinations as well as delusions, and that the enemies we face in the game are not only metaphors for how Simon feels about people around him, but how he actually sees and believes them. One thing that tipped me off that it's not just depression and anxiety is when Simon has the nightmare sequence called, quote, "You will not survive." He ends that section by trying to determine if what he's experienced is real or hallucination. Almost every time Simon has a nightmare sequence, it's right after we go down somewhere, whether it be a tunnel or a hatch or something like that out of Silent Hill 2. To me, this shows Simon's depression getting so bad that he has a psychotic episode and is not just a case of depression. Simon also regularly hears voices and sees a dark version of himself. This goes on even when we're out of nightmare sequences and is one of the first things we see in game. This seems like a pretty clear indication of something like schizophrenia, but I think it's actually something else, a subtype of schizophrenia called schizoaffective disorder, specifically schizoaffective depressive type. What this means in a literal sense is someone who presents symptoms of schizophrenia as well as a mood disorder like bipolar disorder or major depression, and the schizophrenic symptoms get worse as the mood disorder gets worse, and for Simon that's his depression. When I was a teen, I was also put on 40 milligrams of citalopram just like Simon was, and it caused me to be in a state of psychosis for about a year, and it felt like Cry of Fear IRL. You see, when someone has schizoaffective disorder or something similar, it is common for antidepressants to trigger an episode instead of helping. This leads me to believe that Simon's symptoms getting worse as the game progresses is tied to Dr. Purnell upping his dosage. I'd like to mention his morphine use, and from what I read briefly, morphine is one of the most common opiates to cause hallucinations, and this might also be what's causing him to see things because he most likely wasn't using it before the car crash paralyzed him. I think it could be a combination of factors like his drug use, deep depression, and disability that causes his symptoms to finally emerge. From my experience, psychosis can be triggered by highly emotional events, and for Simon there are many factors that I think to what we saw in Cry of Fear. First and foremost, the car crash accident that led to him being disabled. Secondly, his relationship, or lack thereof, with Sophie. Third, being stuck in an apartment that had a serial killer who would leave notes for people. All of these things compounded to make Simon go insane. In the roof scene with Sophie, he says he doesn't know where all the monsters came from, and this leads me to believe that this is all new to him. It might even be his first time experiencing a psychotic break.